And the other important point to make is I think most people misunderstand inflation, and they misunderstand the cause of inflation as well, and they misunderstand what money is. The thing they misunderstand about inflation is it's completely a vector. There's 10,000 different numbers, and you need to calculate your own market basket of desirable products. And the desirable market basket should be assets, products, and services that you want in the location you intend to live. When you do that, you'll find that the real inflation rate is probably double to triple what the CPI is published in any given country. It doesn't matter whether it's Argentina or Venezuela or Turkey or the US. It's generally always double to triple. You can tell it always has been. For example, the US inflation rate nominally for 100 years is about 2%. But in fact, we know that the US dollar lost 99.5% of its value.
Yep.
So if you back solve, you can calculate that the real monetary inflation rate's been about 8 to 9% for 100 years. It hasn't ever been 2%. And so you're deluding yourself to think that. So that's the first problem people have, the misnomer. And the second misnomer is, and this comes from, quoting Milton Friedman without thinking too hard. People they quote bromides, but they don't think very hard about it. Friedman said, inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. And people think they're smart when they say that. But if you thought about it a bit, you would realize that it sounds good. It sounds revolutionary. It's not even true. Inflation is not everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. Inflation is substantially or partly a monetary phenomenon. If I double the amount of money or the currency in a system, if I double it, I will get inflation. If I increase it by a factor of 100, I'll definitely get inflation. That's not in dispute. But now here's the big question. Can I create inflation without increasing the currency supply? And the answer is yes. If you thought about it for even a minute, if I pass a law making it illegal for anybody to work in the country, and if you need people working to create products, will the supply of products go up or down?
Down.
If I make it illegal to create food, or if I drive up the cost of labor, or if I put a tariff
or shut down the economy for a year,
or if I shut down the economy, right, for a year, or if I shut down the ports or the airports, or I stop the railroads, or I cease the shipping, or if I refuse to import oil from a country I don't agree with. All of those things are non-monetary phenomena. They're policy. So tax policy, labor policy, healthcare policy, economic policy, foreign policy, domestic policy, substantially everything the government does is inflationary. Everything. And even if they don't increase the currency supply, they'll create inflation. So coming back to your question, if we had 8% inflation and you believed it, and if I raised the interest rates to 8% tomorrow, would I stop the inflation? And the answer is no, not as long as there's government, because everything the government does, every policy they have with intent to do good, creates inflammation in the economy and inefficiency, and thereby contracts the supply, right? And creates inflation, drives up the prices, right? When we reshore all of the semiconductor fab facilities from Taiwan to Pennsylvania or Ohio, and then we hire unionized labor to work in the facility. And then when we stop buying from the low-cost provider in Taiwan, how is that not going to drive up the price of chips? And how is that not going to drive up the price of everything that has a chip in it? It's going to, right? And when we hire all those people, how is that not going to drive up the price of labor for everyone else that needs those people? Right? These are all inflationary policies having nothing to do with money. So ultimately, I think that the conclusion is inflation is much higher than you thought it was. And the sources of inflation are from a dozen different places, all of them generally related to public policy, every policy. Energy policy, you want to get all your energy from solar panels, right? That drives up the price of energy. Every single policy conceivable drives inflation. The more government you have, the more inflation you have. As the government increases its scope, as the scope of government increases, the scope of the currency supply increases, as well as the scope of regulation, thereby impairing the production of goods and services, creating more scarcity, driving up price, undermining market systems that would otherwise attempt to clear the market by matching supply and demand. But how do you match supply and demand if the supply is in China and the demand's in the US and there's a tariff, right, sitting between the two? You can't match the supply and the demand. So the conclusion is, right, none of these policies are going to stop inflation. Inflation will continue. And, you know, even if I had the ability to change every single government policy on earth for every country, right? It's not likely that I can affect all those things overnight. So I would say that you're better off served looking for a way to protect your own life savings.
Yep.
Through a proper investment strategy, right? You can probably save yourself. Maybe you can save your company or your institution or do some good for your family.